No matter what your feelings are, you've got to give Marvel some credit. Their characters are fun, their writing can be sharp, and their stories can be moving. But a universe that's sprawling is still going to have some pretty stupid stuff going on with it.
Product placement in big movies is inescapable these days, but this is pure marketing shenanigans run amok. In the first Iron Man film, Stark used what was at the time the most cutting-edge phone around, the LG VX9400.
Iron Man ability, LG ingenuity, together in every LG phone.
In Iron Man 2, he got a slate of sci-fi glass branded with LG and Stark Tech logos. But in Civil War, it's a Vivo V3, a fairly cheap phone mainly available in Asia. The move was done for product placement for when the movie showed in that market, but for a tech billionaire like Stark, it just seems silly. He should be using something so cool we can't even imagine it, not something anyone could pick up at a corner shop. Bad Guy Helmut Zemo has a sinister plan that revolves around grainy security footage of the Winter Soldier killing Tony Stark's parents. So, two big questions here. Why is there a security camera on a random deserted backwoods road? And how on earth did the footage survive to present day, considering Winter Soldier shoots out the camera when he's done? It's an amazing coincidence beyond belief that there just happened to be a security camera on a tree right where Howard Stark's car crashed. Unless that's the Winter Soldier's lucky killing tree. Tony Stark convinces Spider-Man to join his cause, in part with the promise of building him a high-tech new costume.
You're in dire need of an upgrade. Systemic, top to bottom. 100-point restoration, that's why I'm here.
Just a few hours later, Spidey shows up already wearing the completed suit. That was fast. Has Tony secretly been working on a Spider-Man suit in his spare time all along? Maybe Tony's hobby is designing clothes for all of his buddies. That would explain the Vision sweaters anyway. Zemo's big plan to cause the Avengers to destroy themselves works amazingly well, especially considering it doesn't actually make any sense and relies entirely on coincidence. For starters, there's that unexplained tree-based security camera footage we mentioned earlier, but that's just the start. What about the fact that the big showdown at the end of the film only works if Iron Man happens to follow Captain America to the bunker? That's something Zemo couldn't possibly have known would happen. If Iron Man had stayed put, the end of the movie would have just been Cap kicking Zemo's butt and then stomping the incriminating videotape into pieces. An even bigger coincidence? His plan is designed to cause the Avengers to fight amongst themselves. But by the time his plan starts, they are already fighting with each other over the Sokovia Accords.
Sometimes I want to punch you in your perfect teeth.
Which means his whole plan is kinda pointless. Especially since he could have accomplished everything he wanted by simply emailing the video to Tony Stark, instead of trying to trick him into flying all the way to Siberia to view it on a VHS tape. Hey, Tony could have just watched the video on his Vivo smartphone. The movie begins with a breathless action sequence as the Avengers try to stop the villain Crossbones from stealing a deadly biological weapon. Just as Captain America is about to learn who's behind the theft, Crossbones blows himself up. And then, everyone gets so busy making speeches they forget to wonder who was hiring supervillains to steal the Doomsday virus, and more importantly, why? Was it Zemo? Or maybe the ghost of Robert Redford? Or was Ultron up to his old tricks again? Nick Fury was basically the architect of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and played a significant role in just about every big event within the MCU. Well, at least he did. Because you'd think he might have something to say about the events of Civil War, yet he was completely and mysteriously absent from the film.
Get me off the grid!
Also missing? Fury's second in command, Maria Hill, so what the heck happened to her? Given that S.H.I.E.L.D.'s whole mission at the beginning of the MCU is to provide oversight to superhero activities, it would make sense for them to be at least a little involved with the Sokovia Accords. But apparently S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury, and Maria Hill were all busy taking a long vacation in Tahiti.
You should go sometime.
Where?
Tahiti. It's a magical place.
Between Tony Stark's creation Ultron blowing up Sokovia in Avengers Age of Ultron, and the Scarlet Witch taking out a part of a building in Civil War, the Avengers sure have a lot to answer for. But not to the government. Remember, this is the same government that tried to nuke New York City in Avengers.
I got a nuke coming in. It's gonna blow in less than a minute.
It's beyond hypocritical for the government to get upset at the Avengers for causing collateral damage when they were planning to kill literally millions of their own citizens to stop some aliens. When it's time for the big showdown, Captain America and Iron Man go on recruiting missions. but the folks they end up with don't really make sense. In Ant-Man, Scott Lang spends the whole film trying to go straight, leaving the criminal life behind so he could be a good dad to his daughter. That goes out the window with no explanation, as Ant-Man becomes a fugitive again, pretty much because he has a man crush on Chris Evans. Which, fair enough.
Wow, this is awesome. Captain America. I know you too. You're great.
And that goes double for Hawkeye, who actually retired at the end of Avengers 2 to spend time with his wife and family, only to end up in a secret prison in the middle of the ocean. Because, well, we don't know why, because it's never addressed.
Hey, Clint.
Hey, man.
Clearly retirement doesn't suit you. You got tired of shooting golf?
Meanwhile, on the other side, Tony Stark goes ahead and recruits a nerdy high school kid and throws him into combat against Captain Freaking America, not to mention the Winter Soldier, the deadliest assassin the world has ever known.
You have a metal arm? That is awesome, dude!
That's just negligent. Aunt May would never be cool with that, Tony. That's a straight up deal breaker, dude. Before Age of Ultron, the last time we saw Tony Stark was in his solo flick Iron Man 3. Stark spends most of that film dealing with the post-traumatic stress from the alien invasion in the Avengers. He eventually realizes he doesn't need the armor and walks off into the sunset with Pepper Potts. Nice. Great ending. So long, Tony. So then, why is Tony flying around in a shiny new suit when Age of Ultron rolls around? We never get an answer. And Age of Ultron basically ignores all the character development and growth that we saw in Iron Man 3. Why? Well, probably so he can go and make the movie's villain by accident. Speaking of which, Ultron might get top billing, but seriously, Tony Stark is the real villain of this movie. He tinkers with technology and magic he doesn't understand, and then just sets the whole thing to run on autopilot, so he can go party. And then he's somehow surprised when an evil AI is born from the all-powerful Infinity Stone. Even worse, when Captain America calls him out on his idiocy, he gets all defensive and shifts the blame. Sure, his intentions may have been noble, but building some fail-safes into his insanely dangerous experiments might have been even nobler. Or at least run some antivirus software or something, dude. The big party scene early in the runtime was one of the best moments in this film, serving as a fun reminder that this is a big, expansive universe. But where did Falcon and War Machine disappear to when the action started? At least War Machine shows up right at the end, but Falcon is still nowhere to be found. Wouldn't having an extra flying guy be useful during this gigantic battle that threatened an entire city? And it'd be one thing if these characters hadn't showed up early on. But come on, they're already in the movie. What could Falcon possibly have had to do that'd be more important than helping save the entire freaking world? Oh, well, never mind. In Captain America: The Winter Soldier, Cap forces S.H.I.E.L.D.'s helicarriers to blow themselves up, and then the whole S.H.I.E.L.D. organization disbands. But right when the Avengers need it most, boom! A helicarrier comes out of nowhere to save the day. That's not only really convenient, it also makes no sense. The helicarrier was eventually explained away in an episode of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but expecting people to watch a supplemental video to explain the plot contrivances of Avengers Age of Ultron is even dumber than this random helicarrier. Couldn't they have found some other way to get around?
You know, I have the authority to downgrade your ass to a Winnebago.
I'm aware of that, sir.
So, Ultron is an infinitely advanced AI with a bloodlust. He wants to take out the Avengers and also all of humanity. Hey, go big or go home, right? He quickly lets loose inside the internet, and though we're told he can't access the nuclear launch codes thanks to Jarvis fighting him off, there's still a lot of other things he could mess with. How about the electrical grid, the water supply, the fuel supply, traffic lights, air traffic controllers? Why not hijack every piece of tech used by the Avengers and turn it against them? The list goes on. But instead of causing global panic and making toasters kill people, Ultron decides to build a humanoid super body, recruit a couple of freaky super rave kids to help him fight, and then drop a city on the Avengers? That seems needlessly complicated. And stupid.
What's the vibranium for?
I'm glad you asked that because I wanted to take this time to explain my evil.
Look, Ultron, you may be like a super genius robot guy or whatever, but when your plan is officially dumber than the plot of Maximum Overdrive, you messed up.
Oh! What the hell?
When Strange is going through his training at Kamartaj, there are a boatload of other would-be wizards taking on the same drills and learning the same magic alongside him. It's a whole wizard army, just ready to be set loose on any mystical threats, ranging from Caecilius to David Blaine. So, where were all these folks when Caecilius attacked the Sanctums? The Ancient One knows that the bad guy is going to try and take out the Sanctums. So why is only one dude hanging out all by himself as a defender? They have the numbers to set up a platoon of wizards at each sanctum in case of an assault, even if those trainees don't yet have full-on magic mojo yet. A lack of training has never stopped fellow baldy Professor X from throwing kids at the bad guys. It's never stopped Batman, and it shouldn't have stopped an all-out war against Caecilius. Like most big blockbusters, Marvel movies have never been afraid of clunky product placement. In Doctor Strange, things are a bit more subtle, but one noticeable little moment sticks out like a sore thumb. Strange is a world-renowned doctor, and he's pretty dang rich because of it. He doesn't skimp on the cars that he haphazardly drives around mountains, and his extravagant New York City apartment must cost millions. So why does Stephen Strange use a Surface 3 tablet? The Surface 3 is basically the Toyota Corolla of the computer world. It's fine, but it's far from the best if you have an unlimited budget. Strange couldn't even spring for a Surface Pro? That's weak stuff, Doc. The movie kicks off with Caecilius stealing spells from the library at Kamartaj in order to summon Dormammu. It's clear that these books are extremely dangerous, and they're only protected by some loose chains? It's basically level 1 wizard stuff to make a portal, so it's clear that the chains aren't there for protection. That's why they have librarians, which seems to be the most dangerous job in the whole joint. After the initial head-chopping scene, we see our man Wong in the library protecting the books. Unfortunately, Wong isn't, great at his job. Technically, no knowledge is forbidden in Kamartaj, but would it be so crazy to protect these books a little better? Obviously, a regular vault wouldn't be immune to wizard portals, grabby hands, or even your standard Hamburglar. But these guys have the most powerful magic on Earth at their disposal. There's gotta be a magic force field spell in one of these books, right? Sometimes the honor system doesn't work, okay? It's hard to overlook the film's most absurd coincidence. Doctor Strange dives into a book all about time manipulation only moments before Caecilius attacks. It's perfect timing in the worst possible way. Where the heck has Caecilius been during all this time while Strange is training? Caecilius steals the pages for a spell in the first moments of the movie, then waits months to stage his next attack. All he did was allow the Ancient One more time to plan, train Strange, and beef up their defenses, which they kind of failed at anyhow. Mordo spends most of the movie warning Strange over and over about messing around with time, noting it can result in everything from the end of the world to severe constipation.
Temporal manipulations can create branches in time, unstable dimensional openings, spatial paradoxes, time loops!
But later, Strange uses the Eye of Agamotto to rewind downtown Hong Kong to a time before the local sanctum falls, in an effort to save the day. He then cleverly mucks around with a time loop to stop Dormammu in his tracks.
Dormammu! I've come to bargain! Dormammu! Dormammu! Dormammu!
If messing around with an apple was dangerous, you'd think erasing the destruction of an entire city is flirting with all-out cosmic disaster, right? But after all those warnings from Mordo, there are no immediate consequences for Strange's actions. Everything seems fine. Even still, Mordo seems to know what's up.
You still think there will be no consequences, Strange? No price to pay.
By the end of the film, Mordo's got a brand new bag. His mission is to go around and take magic away from people who use it, since too much unchecked magic honestly seems like a pretty bad idea. So Mordo can apparently just take away magic now? That ability sure would have come in handy a bit earlier. When the dude with all the magic power was straight up trying to end the entire world. Unless, of course, Mordo can only suck the magic out of low-level Dumbledores, like the guy with the spine problems, which is a pretty crappy magic trick. It's the magic equivalent of stepping on bugs. I mean, it's pointless, and it only feels good if you're a jerk. Mordo should pick on someone his own power level. From his outfit to his entertainment system, Star-Lord is all about the 80s, including when it comes to the tech he whips out in this opening scene. This vintage Mattel football video game has been rewired to work as a tracking device, but where did it come from? there are only two options. One, that Quill stumbled upon it during his travels around the galaxy, which would be a weird coincidence to say the least. Or two, maybe he had it on him when he was kidnapped from the Earth as a kid. But unlike his Walkman, he wasn't too sentimental about this toy to repurpose it into a useful piece of tech. This big action set piece pitting the Guardians against a space monster known as an obelisk was such an amazing scene, you can almost ignore the obvious question. Why were the Guardians there in the first place? The Sovereign Leader offers a reason.
We could not risk the lives of our own sovereign citizens.
But they wouldn't have to. As we find out shortly, they own an entire fleet of remote-controlled ships that seem perfectly equipped for a job like this. What prompted them to punt this job to a shady group of misfits like the Guardians? We may never know. Director James Gunn wanted his sequel to include some characters from the comics that didn't make the cut the first time around. And Mantis, who has a long and storied history with the Guardians, was an obvious choice. But to fit her in, Gunn had to tweak her story. So in the movie, she's basically an indentured adopted daughter to Ego, using her empathic powers to help him sleep at night. Wait, what? Ego is an ancient, powerful celestial being, and he needs an empath to sleep at night? How did he sleep in the thousands and thousands of years before Mantis came along? And why would he let her, the only person who knew his true intentions, hang out unchaperoned with the Guardians where she could spill the beans at any time? Well, whatever. Maybe Ego just can't manifest a supply of Ambien the way he manifested an entire planet. And maybe his godlike status made him a little overconfident about his nefarious plan. But most importantly, maybe we're so psyched to have Mantis in this movie that her backstory doesn't really need to hold up to scrutiny. In this film, we learn that Quill keeps a pic of Knight Rider-era David Hasselhoff in his pocket, because as a fatherless kid, he used to tell people the Hoff was his real dad. A subplot that leads to this crowd-pleasing cameo from Hasselhoff as one of Ego's various avatars. There's just one problem. This Hoff is a senior citizen, whereas Quill's aspirational dad was the strapping young Hoff of the 1980s. In the context of the story, and for maximum emotional impact on Quill, Ego should have appeared as that version of Hasselhoff. But if that was going to make the difference between working with the Hoff directly versus recreating his younger self using CGI, it's not hard to see why the filmmakers preferred the real thing. Ego is still making a hard pitch for Quill to join him when he also spills a horrifying secret. He's the one who gave Quill's mom cancer, a fact he reveals to his son while also trying to woo him over to the dark side. But for some strange reason, learning that Ego is responsible for the worst trauma of his life doesn't make Quill feel like teaming up with him. An outcome so predictable that any celestial being worth his salt should have seen it coming, and equally inexplicable is why Ego bothered to off Quill's mother at all. What gives, dude?
I returned to Earth to see her 3 times, and I knew if I returned a 4th, I'd never leave.
That's his story, but we don't buy it. Everything we know about Ego suggests he's a raging sociopath who doesn't care about anyone. And since he's planned all along to kidnap Quill from Earth, taking Mom out of the equation seems pointless. Plus, Ego has been alive for millions of years, so what's the big rush? Why not just be happy for 40 or 50 years and then complete the master plan once she dies of old age or something? Of course, this is still an important moment in terms of establishing Ego as a cut-and-dry bad guy and giving Quill a good reason to want to destroy him, but it's one of a handful that doesn't make narrative sense. The timeline of the Marvel Cinematic Universe has always been kind of fuzzy, but Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 represents a real missed opportunity for MCU continuity. Here's the deal. Ego's attempt to take control of the Earth occurs around the same time as films like Captain America Civil War and the ABC series Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Surely the MCU's top crime fighters would have noticed the giant tide of alien goo engulfing half of Missouri. And a crossover cameo in either direction would have really helped to tie this universe together. Sadly, Ego's incursion on Earth never earned so much as a nod in these other Marvel properties, and in Guardians 2, no other MCU characters ever showed up to investigate the goo situation.
In Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings, Katie is a regular human with no superpowers, no combat training, and no experience with the supernatural. Her relative normalcy, frankly, is what makes her endearing. But after she spends little more than a day practicing archery with Guangbo in Talo, she displays Hawkeye-level skills in battle, which would have been a little easier to forgive if the film's entire climax didn't hinge on Katie making a 1-in-a-million shot that nails the bad guy in the throat. After the movie, Marvel tried to explain this in the comics, with Shang-Chi #7 revealing that when people go to Talo, they're given special powers, including super archery. Nice try, Marvel. Nice try. It was awesome to see Yelena grace the screen in the Hawkeye TV series, but the reason for her appearance was quite flimsy. It all came down to a misunderstanding. If the characters would have stopped hitting each other in the face and simply had a conversation, it could have been sorted out in 2 minutes rather than across 6 episodes, which was proven when they finally had a conversation and sorted it out in 2 minutes.
I'm sorry.
Supposedly, Valentina made Yelena think Hawkeye was responsible for the death of Black Widow, so Yelena spent the series trying to assassinate Hawkeye, only to accept much later that it wasn't his fault. What's weird is that the events of Avengers Endgame appear to be known to the general public, as Kamala Khan was able to describe the fight pretty much play-by-play in Ms. Marvel. So why doesn't Yelena, a highly trained super spy, know what everyone else in the world knows? It just doesn't make any sense. In the first episode of What If, the Red Skull uses the Tesseract to create a portal in hopes of unleashing a monster. Captain Carter manages to stop the creature, but not before passing through the portal and getting stranded in the 21st century. However, there's one small problem. The Tesseract doesn't work that way. Canonically, the Tesseract has been established as something that can be used to travel through space, not time. That's why it's called the Space Stone. Yet somehow Captain Carter hurdles through space and time, ending up almost 70 years in the future. If the Space Stone could actually allow the wielder to travel through time, then that would have changed everything. For instance, Thanos would have been much more powerful when he held only 2 Infinity Stones in the beginning of Infinity War. But hey, the series is called What If, after all. Maybe the Infinity Stones operate according to different rules in Captain Carter's universe. The world was in jeopardy countless times throughout Phase 4 of the MCU, ranging from a Celestial's emergence to the Noor dimension, nearly obliterating Earth, and more. Throughout all of this, where were the Avengers? Even if the team itself is disbanded, you'd think individuals like Doctor Strange or Wong would have noticed Wanda's chaos magic at Westview, or Rhodey would have lent Sam Wilson a hand after seeing that the Flag Smashers were a real threat, but nope. Apparently, they were all taking some time off. Of course, if the Avengers showed up every time there was a threat, there wouldn't be much for heroes to do in their own solo films and shows. Because of this, the world was in danger plenty of times before Phase 4 without the Avengers showing up. Just look at Thor: The Dark World and Captain America: The Winter Soldier. But that's the explanation in our universe. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it might be nice if the MCU acknowledged that the Avengers were at least paying attention to all the crap happening in their world. Sometimes, by trying to resolve one plot hole, you create another. Case in point, Eternals trying to explain why none of them tried to stop Thanos from snapping half the universe.
We were instructed not to interfere in any human conflicts unless deviants are involved.
But attempting to offer an explanation for the absence of the Eternals only ended up raising more questions. The non-intervention policy of the Eternals comes from their Celestial Masters. All they cared about was incubating their new baby Celestial in the heart of Earth's core. Here's the issue. In order to do that, the Celestials need the population of Earth to reach a certain point, so having half of humanity snapped out of existence would be a major problem. Not to mention the fact that Thanos might, also snap half the Celestials out of existence too, which is also counterproductive. Maybe it would have been better if the film didn't mention Thanos at all, because now that we're thinking about it, it doesn't make any sense. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness had madness right in the title, so it's easy to forgive any details that don't make sense. However, there is one plot hole from Multiverse of Madness that's a little distracting. Where's Vision? For the entire movie, Wanda seems to forget about Vision. Instead, she's only concerned with finding Billy and Tommy from an alternate universe. Once Wanda finds her kids on Earth 838, Vision is never shown on screen. Even in the climax, when Billy and Tommy fear for their lives from the Scarlet Witch, Wanda 838 rushes to their rescue, while Vision is nowhere to be found. Not even the Vision from Earth 838. There could be reasons why Vision wasn't in this movie besides the prosaic possibility that actor Paul Bettany had a scheduling conflict, but given that Wanda's entire arc in the MCU was intertwined with Vision, it was weird and disappointing that he was barely even mentioned in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. The climax of Thor: Love and Thunder gives the villain Gore a satisfying redemption. Rather than choosing to get revenge on Thor and the other gods, Gore instead asks Eternity to give his dead daughter a second chance at life. It's very moving. Unfortunately, though, it doesn't entirely make sense. The movie acts as though Gore only has two choices: wish to destroy all the gods as he originally intended, or wish his daughter back to life, even though he's dying from a curse and won't be able to take care of her. But as far as the movie seems to explain, Gore can wish for just about anything. The rules behind eternity are hazy. It seems like if Gore phrased his wish more carefully, he wouldn't need to choose between saving his own life and his daughter's. For one, Gore could simply wish to be reunited with his daughter, or he could wish that the drought that wiped out his people never happened. That would mean his daughter would still be alive, and he would never have sworn vengeance on the gods. Ultimately, the film's emotionally bittersweet ending would have felt more earned if it had laid down some rules to the wishes beforehand, so any of it made sense. Doctor Strange has been repeatedly depicted as taking his duties with the utmost of fidelity, even refusing to give up the Time Stone in Infinity War despite it placing a target on his back. So it was surprising when Doctor Strange agreed to cast a risky spell for Peter in No Way Home, especially because he only seems to be doing it to spite Wong. Of course, the spell backfired, so instead of making everybody forget that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, it summoned everybody who knew Spider-Man's secret identity in this and other alternate universes. The whole disaster could have been avoided if Peter and Strange had simply taken a moment to discuss their plan before casting any spells. Come to think of it, it might have been a lot more simple to cast a spell to make people forget Mysterio instead. And even if Strange's spell hadn't blown up in his face, it still wouldn't have done much good. Strange emphasized that a spell wouldn't change history, it would just alter everyone's memories. But erasing memories wouldn't be enough. There would still be plenty of evidence about Spider-Man's secret identity that would be impossible to ignore. The spell would be rendered useless as soon as somebody Googled Spider-Man or Mysterio, or read an old newspaper, or watched an old news program, simply because the incriminating physical evidence would still exist. Doctor Strange does ultimately cast a spell that somehow succeeds in erasing Peter's secret from the public record. Maybe he should have used that spell the first time.
Iman Vellani's portrayal of Ms. Marvel is one of the highlights of the Marvels, yet Kamala Khan is also the root of one of the film's most perplexing plot points. In case you never saw it, which, let's face it, is pretty likely, the movie follows three heroes with energy-based powers. These are Carol Danvers, aka Captain Marvel, Photon, aka Monica Rambeau, and of course Ms. Marvel herself. At one point, the trio arrives at the song and dance planet Aladna to stop the villain's plan of draining its oceans. Now, earlier in the film, Carol had told Kamala about the difficult decisions she's had to make as Captain America, leaving behind a group of doomed refugees, for example.
We need to save who we can.
It's especially hard for her considering that, due to her immense powers, Carol's jurisdiction is basically the entire universe. So when the fight on Aladna becomes dire, Kamala impulsively warps the Marvels away to prove to Carol that she can make difficult decisions too. Essentially, Kamala allows the villain to succeed in decimating the planet just to make a point, which is arguably a bigger character assassination than that time the comics literally killed her. Once upon a time, Jonathan Majors' villain Kang the Conqueror was supposed to be the big bad of the MCU's multiverse saga. Majors lost the role after being found guilty on misdemeanor assault and harassment charges, however, meaning that Marvel's original plans had to be scrapped. But even before that disastrous court case, there were some problems with Majors' character in the MCU. One variant of Kang made his debut in Phase 4 during the Season 1 finale of Loki, calling himself He Who Remains. Meanwhile, another version of the character appeared in 2023's Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. This Kang variant is the one who started the multiversal war in the first place, and because of that, he's presumably the most powerful and dangerous of them all. That's why the other Kang variants worked together to strip him of his futuristic tech and left him to die in the quantum realm. First impressions are everything when it comes to superhero movie villains, and Kang's film introduction sabotaged any excitement built up by the end of Loki. All in all, Quantumania made him look ineffectual and, to put it bluntly, like a bit of a joke. It doesn't help that the manner of his defeat is genuinely comical, and while that might be acceptable for a one-and-done villain, it's hardly a worthy end for Kang the Conqueror. It's probably fair to say that the MCU holds a conflicted view on the morality of vigilantism. Yes, the franchise's superheroes stand up to injustice, especially when the actual justice system is shown to be ineffectual or corrupt. But some of the best superhero stories are about the dangers of vigilantism. Sometimes we see an attempt to bypass that contradiction by making the heroes part of the system itself, like with most incarnations of Captain America, although even those heroes can go rogue every now and again.
I'm not looking for forgiveness, and I'm way past asking permission.
In the comics, the Watergate scandal disturbed Steve Rogers so much that he rebranded himself as a vigilante nomad. Similarly, by the time Sam Wilson takes the shield from Rogers in the MCU, the Avengers have effectively disbanded, meaning he's not officially working for the government. So why does Brave New World open with Sam having his own Captain America hideout with access to all sorts of tech? Who's funding him? It was established that he wasn't being paid in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and he struggled financially during the events of that series.
Is there some kind of fund for heroes, or did Stark pay you when he was around? My condolences, by the way.
Thank you, but no, it doesn't really work like that.
So, what changed? Without official government backing, how was Sam getting intel and backup from US soldiers at the start of the film? It really makes no sense for a glorified vigilante to have such plentiful resources. One question hangs over pretty much the entire plot of Captain America: Brave New World. Should Sam Wilson take the super serum? That's because, as skilled a fighter as Sam is, he's not superhuman, and that's a serious disadvantage in his line of work. Of course, there are a few good reasons why he'd choose not to take it. For one, not everyone's cool with sticking mysterious, life-changing chemicals into their bodies. But the movie makes a more thematic argument too. When Bucky shows up later in the movie, he gives Sam a pep talk, explaining that his bravery and heroism proves that anyone can be a hero. Bucky also suggests that one of Sam's true powers lies in inspiring others to be like him. That's all well and good, but the fact remains that by not taking the serum, Sam is handing an advantage to the people who would seek to harm both him and the world. There are no doubt countless would-be Captain Americas out there who would happily take the serum and fight for their country. And even though that hasn't always worked out in the past, that's not to say others couldn't do the job better, serumed up and all. Oh, and the idea that Sam is inspiring people by being a quote-unquote normal superhero loses a lot of its luster when you remember that he's wielding high-tech gadgetry from Wakanda and benefits from connections with the US military. So yes, Sam might be a couple of tiers lower than Thor or the Hulk, but let's not pretend he's building suits with a box of scraps. The Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy was a staggering success story for the MCU. James Gunn took a bunch of practically unknown comic book characters and turned them into some of the franchise's most popular heroes.
We are Groot.
All three Guardians movies did well with critics, though 2023's Volume 3 scored lowest on Rotten Tomatoes with a rating of 82%. The film fell prey to a problem that plagues many mainstream popcorn flicks, the trope in which heroes mow down countless henchmen while keeping the main villain alive to make some sort of moral point. This is especially galling as we witness Rocket and the Guardians wipe out not just the High Evolutionary's henchmen, but also the animals he genetically mutated against their will. In the end, Rocket inexplicably draws the line at killing the High Evolutionary himself, despite the fact that he's a genocidal, planet-destroying threat.
Why? Because I'm a freaking Guardian of the Galaxy.
Considering the movie's messaging, it's also weird that the first mission carried out by Rocket's new Guardians team involves them killing a load of alien animals. Sure, they're protecting a village, but couldn't we have ended this movie on a slightly less muddled note? Despite the many problems with his character, Jonathan Majors' performance is one of the best parts of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. The same cannot be said of his performance as Victor Timely, however. In both Loki and his brief appearance in Quantumania's second post-credit scene, Majors gives Victor Timely a distracting and frankly baffling voice.
What are you talking about?
Sure, it's distinct, and Timely's nasally staccato rhythm does make a certain amount of sense in terms of him being an eccentric showman from the 1800s. The fact that Majors was going to be portraying multiple Kang variants may also have encouraged him to make them distinct, but even though there are narrative reasons to go with a unique style of voice, that doesn't change the fact that the voice itself is incredibly grating. More than anything, it serves to turn Victor Timely into something you might find in a comedy sketch, rather than the brilliant and tragic character he's supposed to be. One of the biggest unanswered questions in Deadpool and Wolverine revolves around the villain of the film, Mr. Paradox. Basically, why did he actually tell Deadpool his whole evil plot? This is never a smart move for a movie baddie, of course, but it's particularly jarring here. At the beginning of the film, Wade Wilson has given up his persona as Deadpool, leaving him adrift in the world. Wade feels like he lacks purpose in life, and it doesn't help that Happy Hogan rejected him from the Avengers.
I was team leader, founder, really, of X-Force. Sadly, they all perished in action.
Oh, how exactly did that happen?
Well, the police say gravity.
Still, he's not down and out just yet, as Wade eventually ends up captured by agents of the Time Variance Authority and brought to Mr. Paradox. It's then that Paradox tells Wade how important he is to the multiverse.
I am Marvel Jesus.
So far, so good, but things get a little less good when Paradox inexplicably monologues about how he's going to destroy Wade's universe. He even reveals that he'll use a new experimental machine to speed up the process. This obviously annoys Deadpool, as it means his friends will be time-ripped into oblivion. At first, Mr. Paradox's motivations make a certain amount of sense, because he says Deadpool is supposed to be kept alive by the higher-ups. But that makes less sense when it's later revealed that Mr. Paradox is working against the TVA, and that his Time Ripper machine is a secret. If that's the case, then why bring Wade in at all? And again, why tell Wade his plan? It's never made clear what Paradox gained from doing that, and like so many other classic cinematic villains, his plan might well have succeeded if he hadn't. Comic books often utilize certain visual elements that don't necessarily adhere to how things would look in real life. Instead, they make sense in a more abstract way, or they're just there to look cool. Case in point, superhero masks with white or blank eyes. The most obvious example of this is Batman, of course, but there are countless others, including both Deadpool and Marvel's most famous X-Man, Wolverine. The critical and commercial success of the live-action X-Men movies marked a major moment in the history of comic book films. 2000's X-Men is widely considered to be the movie that laid the foundation for the modern superhero cinematic landscape. Notably, X-Men took cues from Blade in terms of its heroes' wardrobes, doing away with the colorful costumes seen in the comics in favor of dark clothing and lots of leather.
You actually go outside in these things? What would you prefer? Yellow spandex?
Luckily, fans finally got to see Hugh Jackman don Wolverine's iconic yellow suit in Deadpool and Wolverine, which looks surprisingly good in live action. Well, apart from the mask, or more specifically, the eyes. The whole white, pupilless eyes thing looks great on the page, but in live action, it can be weirdly distracting. You can't really argue this was done for purity's sake either, as Wolverine's actual eyes do sometimes show through his mask in the comics. In the movie, you end up with something that looks more like a Halloween costume than anything else, and it hardly helps that Jackman also loses the ability to emote using his eyes. Deadpool's inherent goofiness means that this approach works well for him, but let's be honest, it looks kinda dumb on Wolverine. Here's a fun fact for you. The first big-budget feature film starring a Marvel Comics character was 1986's Howard the Duck.
No more Mr. Nice Duck.
That movie was a total flop, and more than a decade passed before a film came out that proved Marvel characters deserved a place on the silver screen. 1998's Blade. The live-action feature film starred Wesley Snipes as the titular vampire hunter. Snipes and many of his co-stars didn't really resemble the characters from the comics, of course, but the movie's style and aesthetic provided the blueprint for the superhero films of the early 2000s. In short, Blade was a big hit that made a serious cultural splash, and so there was a lot of excitement in the air when, in 2019, Kevin Feige announced that Blade would be getting his own MCU movie. With Mahershala Ali in the lead role, Blade was originally supposed to be a part of Phase 5 of the MCU. To set this up, Ali even had a voice cameo in 2021's Eternals. Sadly, the project just slowly sunk deeper and deeper into development hell. Multiple writers and directors have come and gone, and it's become such a torture production that even Deadpool and Wolverine poked fun at it.
There's only been one Blade. There's only ever gonna be one Blade.
Given the vast resources at their disposal, and the fact that Phase 5 has been light on big draw projects, it's almost unthinkable that Marvel execs didn't go all out to make the Blade reboot happen. Hopefully, we'll still get to see it one day, but at this point, we're not exactly holding our breath.
Captain America Brave New World brings back a beloved hero, Bucky Barnes, for a quick cameo. During his chat with Sam Wilson, it's mentioned that Bucky's running for Congress, which immediately made Marvel fans gasp with a collective, huh? Or as Sam says during the scene,
Wow.
Why would Bucky have any interest in politics? For the purposes of the plot to Thunderbolts, he needs to be a congressman so that we can see him working to take down Valentina's evil enterprise with the Ox Group. He eventually goes rogue and joins up with the Thunderbolts to bring her down with them, but his sudden political interests don't add up, unless it was always his mission to arrest Valentina. There's also the matter of people willingly electing a confirmed former assassin. He was the Winter Soldier for decades and killed many high-profile people. Yes, he was under mind control and has now gotten better, but one would assume his political opponent would have run opposition ads nonstop, reminding constituents that he's, the Winter Soldier. If he could be mind-controlled once to be a Russian agent, what's to stop that from happening again? Although it's possible that his history as a World War II veteran would earn him some brownie points among the baby boomers, and he did fight Thanos' army. Given the ridiculousness of the real-world political landscape, maybe it's not the weirdest thing for voters to be jazzed about a reformed killer representing them. It might be the least surprising death in cinematic history. After being largely left out of the Thunderbolts trailers and pushed to the side on billboards, Taskmaster dies early on without much fanfare. She says one line of dialogue and fights for a couple minutes before Ghost shoots her in the head. It's an abrupt, violent end to a fan-favorite villain. Honestly, Taskmaster's death is only part of the problem. It does establish that any one of the Thunderbolts could die, and it shows how someone can have an awful life without getting any chance at redemption. However, the main issue is that Ghost seems completely unfazed that she killed someone for no reason. Shortly after Ghost kills Taskmaster, they realize that Valentina has set them up to all meet at the vault at the same time so that she could kill them all with the incinerator. If Ghost had waited just a few seconds longer, Taskmaster could have played a more pivotal role in the film. Plus, Ghost and Yelena have one quick conversation about Taskmaster before moving on with the plot. Having Taskmaster's murder really affect Ghost could have played into the movie's larger themes about redemption and how no one is beyond saving. Taskmaster never receives her chance to have a better life, and it's a genuine tragedy that largely gets ignored.
We all have things that we regret.
Bucky's back in action in Thunderbolts, complete with the signature metal arm he got from the Wakandans. However, that arm was taken from him in the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special to fulfill Rocket's wish from Avengers Infinity War. Nebula gives Rocket the arm as a present, so one would assume Bucky would have to go without it. But in Thunderbolts and Captain America Brave New World, he has it back. There could be some perfectly logical explanations for this. Maybe Rocket and Nebula came back to Earth to return it after realizing it was kinda messed up to take a guy's arm from him. Another possibility is that the Wakandans made more than one arm for the super soldier. A more out there theory is that Nebula never stole Bucky's arm in the first place. Considering vibranium came to Wakanda via a meteorite, it's otherworldly in nature. Nebula could have gotten vibranium from somewhere else and fashioned a fake arm to give Rocket, who now basically owns a Sideshow collectible version of Bucky's prosthetic. Of course, this is all probably thinking about it too much. The Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special probably isn't canon to the larger MCU, and it'd be best to just assume Bucky's arm was never taken in the first place. It must suck to be a regular person in the MCU. You never know when half of the population will disappear or when some random guy you've never heard of before starts turning everyone into shadows. This is all to say, something that might impress us in the real world may not faze them much. Following the Thunderbolts confronting Valentina and Sentry, they regroup on the sidewalk outside of the Watchtower. As they're talking in full costume, you can see people walking by behind them and not really paying any mind to the superhumans in front of them. Granted, Yelena isn't a household name like Thor, but still, Bucky's pretty famous, and a sitting congressman. For all New Yorkers know, these could just be cosplayers, but everyone seems surprisingly calm to have these folks congregating outside of what used to be Avengers Tower. If we were in the MCU, we'd immediately suspect something bad was happening if these figures were around, and get out of there long before the Void begins his shadow spree. Sensible, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's pretty difficult to figure out how the MCU movies and Disney Plus shows interact with each other. The third act of Thunderbolts takes place in New York City, which we recently saw get under Wilson Fisk's thumb as its new mayor on Daredevil Born Again. He cracked down hard on vigilantes, basically turning New York into a war zone by the end of Season 1. It begs the question of how allowing an all-powerful Void to take over the city, albeit momentarily, sits with him and his constituents. It's hard to pin down exactly, but Thunderbolts Thunderbolts should take place sometime later in 2027, considering it follows Captain America Brave New World, which was set at the beginning of that year. Much of Daredevil Born Again occurs in 2026 and 2027 while Fisk is mayor, so the events of Thunderbolts and Born Again should somewhat happen concurrently. But there's no word of Fisk at all, even though he shouldn't really care about a government-sanctioned new Avengers getting established on his turf, seeing as they wouldn't technically be vigilantes if they answered to a higher organizational power. Sadly, we may never see D'Onofrio's Kingpin on the big screen, as the actor said on the Happy Sad Confused podcast,
I'm only usable for television series, that kind of a thing. Different kinds of series, whatever it is, it's all caught up in rights and stuff right now.
That sounds like Thunderbolts couldn't have even used a Fisk poster to have some kind of connective tissue. For all casual audiences know, superheroes are still fully welcome in New York. The Thunderbolts team doesn't have much in the way of pure firepower.
So what, do we all just punch and shoot?
Yeah, and that's not going to do much good against Sentry, and it's even more useless against the Void. The team had to find an alternative way to stop the Void from engulfing New York in darkness, and Yelena is the first to throw a Hail Mary, walking right into the Void. Prior to this, we see the Void turn people into shadows. For all we know, they died right then and there, and Yelena could have just walked to her demise. She couldn't know what would be waiting for her on the other side, and happened to get lucky that it was memories of her past trauma that she could break through and find Bob. The rest of the Thunderbolts follow suit by walking into the Void and helping Bob realize he's not alone, allowing him to overcome his negative thoughts. We suppose walking directly into what could have been certain death is as good of a plan as any. Even if Yelena didn't walk into the darkness, she would have been consumed anyway, so we might as well get a visual representation of Yelena embracing her own darkness rather than try to run away from it. The Thunderbolts hug Bob, showing him he's not alone in his mental health struggles. This suppresses the Void and brings New York out of the darkness, and everyone who's previously turned into a shadow returns immediately. Bob can't remember anything, but the Thunderbolts do. We assume everyone in the vicinity just experienced their own personal traumas inside the Void, but a minute after everything goes back to normal, Valentina has no issues about tricking the Thunderbolts to come on stage in front of members of the press to introduce them as the new Avengers. How'd those reporters get there so fast? Wouldn't they have all been in the Void too? It seems like they would want to cover what just happened rather than care about a bunch of C- and D-list vigilantes and a congressman getting branded as the new Avengers. Presumably, no one knows that Bob is the Void to direct any questions toward him. It just seems odd that people so quickly go back to normal like nothing happened. Granted, that does appear to be the MO in the MCU. People disappeared for 5 years and then came back with what appears to be minimal disruption.
But then, 8 months ago, a band of brave heroes brought us back.
Everyone in New York disappearing into a Void for maybe an hour seems like child's play compared to the rest of the horrors that occur regularly in this universe. In the Thunderbolts post-credits scene, which takes place 14 months later, we learn that the new Avengers are operational, but Sam Wilson still wants to put his own team together. He's even filed a copyright claim against the new Avengers. But it's worth noting that Yelena implies that Sam hasn't even put together his own Avengers team yet. What's taking him so long? At the end of Captain America Brave New World, Sam was poised to recreate the Avengers with the injured Joaquin Torres, the new Falcon, by his side. That means by the time the post-credit scene occurs, Sam would have likely had a good year and a half to form his Avengers and hasn't done it yet. It could understandably be a little tough for him. Doctor Strange is probably out in the multiverse somewhere while Captain Marvel is likely on another planet. That still leaves Hulk, She-Hulk, Thor, Shang-Chi, and Moon Knight he could get to sign up, to name a few. Hopefully he gets his act together soon.